Hello, everybody, and welcome into the nicest episode of the Couch GMs podcast. I'm your host, George Kerth, here along with the one and only Tyler Snyder. Tyler, what's up?
Well, everything's fine. Titans are the top team in the AFC, so it's a good day.
And Cody Roadcap. Cody, how are you?
I'm doing good. Packers are near the top in the NFC, so I guess we're doing good.
George, how about your Eagles?
We have our moments. I mean, I don't really want to talk about it, honestly. So, forgot to mention it is Friday, November 12th. So if you guys are listening in, you know when we're going here. And we're going to get off my Eagles topic. We're going to talk some actual NFL news and notes. And we're going to give a full preview of Week 10, telling you who to start and sit in fantasy and more. You can find us on thecouchgms.com with even more info than you get on this podcast, and on our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Couch GMs. Why don't we jump in and talk NFL news? NFL news, I know we covered a lot of things on our Tuesday show, but we have an update on a couple of things. First, let's start with Cam Newton, who has now signed with the Carolina Panthers because Sam Darnold is expected to miss extended time and hit the injured reserve list. They say Cam Newton will start when he is up to speed as well. I mean, I know some of us on this podcast are fans of PJ Walker, and we think Cam Newton's kind of washed. Do you think that this is a good move for the Panthers?
It'll sell jerseys again.
Well, you're right. Or people can reuse their jersey if he wears the same number.
Or people can reuse. It might get some people excited.
It'll sell jerseys. It'll sell tickets. Yeah, my biggest question is, what does it do to the value of DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson?
Yeah, that's what we're going to have to wait and see, because when we saw Cam Newton up in New England last season, he wasn't the best thrower of the football anymore. I mean, he's always had his limitations when it came to throwing, and they've seemed to digress a little bit. He still has his running ability, which could actually make him a viable fantasy option some weeks, depending on matchups, just because he will still touchdowns. It might hurt Christian McCaffrey in the red zone, too. That's something you have to consider. But honestly, Robbie Anderson can't get any worse, so hopefully this is at least boost for him.
Maybe just a little bit of confidence for an offense, like that spark, just because it's something new that'll maybe get the dropsies out of DJ Moore too. Because I mean, they've just been struggling as an offense in general, so they really can't get much worse. Like you're saying, Robbie Anderson can't get much worse. The offense in general almost right now can't get much worse. So I'm gonna hope that it stays the same or gets a little better thanks to that new spark, or oh my gosh, Cam's back, and everyone loved Cam in Carolina, but I'm not super confident in that offense. I mean, outside of Christian McCaffrey and hoping DJ Moore has a little bit of a rebound.
Yeah, I mean, they are a half a game out of the wild card right now. They're sitting at the 8th spot right behind Atlanta. So this move could most likely get them into the playoffs. It looks like that's what they're trying to do. And their defense at the beginning of the year was good enough to keep them in any game. So they could be a sneaky team that makes a decent push here the second half of the season. And one other name, Tommy Tremble, the rookie. We've talked about him a few times early in the season. He hasn't done much since they traded Dan Arnold. But when Cam Newton was there prior, now granted it was a different offense, he was a big fan of throwing to the tight ends. That's why Greg Olsen, Ian Thomas, those guys were always decent fantasy options with him there. So Tommy Tremble could be a sleeper name that you might want to add this week or next week, and once Cam Newton gets more involved in the offense.
Definitely. And then, Cody, I kind of have to ask you what it was like during the OBJ sweepstakes, as there was first he was going to take a little extra time, and then we found out today it was between the Rams and the Packers, and he ended up signing with the LA Rams. Cody, what was that like in those couple of moments thinking the Packers might get OBJ? And then we'll go into actually the fantasy outlook of the Rams.
So as a Packers fan, it was an experience that we're so accustomed to. Look back earlier this season, Stephon Gilmore, he wants to go to the Packers, and that was leaked very early in the process. He ended up trading to the Panthers, and they're like, "Oh, that's where I always wanted to go." The very beginning, the first name out of the mouth when he was cut, the Packers were his top choice. Then it was like, "Oh, the Chiefs, here's the Saints," and it almost seems like the Packers are the team that agents use to get action. Oh, the Packers are interested, we want to be interested. And even the Rams were late contenders. They came in late. They really sold him on the offense. Sean McVay talked to him about, how much they're going to use him. I mean, I understand they're different players, but Deshaun Jackson just asked for his release because they couldn't support 4 wide receivers. We'll see how that plays out. Now, as a Packers fan, it would have been fun. I joked about with you guys. Back in our college days, we would play Madden and do connected franchises, and I would always trade for Odell Beckham to have Odell Beckham and Devontae Adams. I mean, it would have just been like reminiscing in Madden. But like my fiance even said when she got home from work today, Odell Beckham, I guess he would have made us marginally better, but he's not going to fix the Packers special teams. And until the Packers special teams gets better, I mean, that's the bigger need right there. And that's not the sexy thing that fans want to talk about. It's not fantasy relevant. But OBJ for the Rams, I mean, that's definitely going to be fun. And a lot of people would be now using the Rams when they play Madden.
Yeah, I'm just confused about a lot of things when it comes to the Odell Beckham sweepstakes. I mean, one, why do so many fans out there want him for your team? I mean, I understand the talent that he could possess, but honestly, we haven't really seen classic Odell since 2016, and the amount of locker room drama that he brings, it makes me nervous. I wanted to avoid him as a Titans fan. Not that we had any shot to get him. He wasn't even in the discussions, but I definitely didn't want him. I'm confused that he says he wanted his release from the Browns because he is tired of the usage, and then, like you said, goes to a team that had to release a receiver because he's not getting used enough. I mean, they have Cooper Kupp, they have Robert Woods, and honestly, I don't think you can just go ahead and bench Van Jefferson with the addition of Odell Beckham. He's been too good, and he's a future star. So I don't know where all these targets are going to come into play. And the last thing I'm confused about is how people are suddenly like, oh, now the Rams are the best team in the NFL. Now the Rams have they're so much better than everybody else now. They're this super team. People are attributing them to the Detroit Pistons of last year and the old New York Yankees about how they just buy all their players and became a super team. Does Odell really take the Rams that much higher? Is adding Odell on the field really that much better than Kupp, Woods, Van Jefferson? And people are saying, how is it possible that anybody can stop this offense now? They were just stopped. Are we forgetting that a few days ago, Titans fan or not, their offense was shut down completely. The Titans showed a way to do it. You get in Matt Stafford's face, he makes mistakes. So I'm confused about a lot of things, why people are making a huge deal out of this. I don't know. I guess I could be proved wrong.
No, hey, we all could be, and we'll have to wait and see how their usage is when we can talk more about that when we get to their game. But Cody, go ahead. You can wrap up.
No, I was going to say, I tend to agree with you too. Don't get me wrong. I would have loved Odell Beckham in green and gold. You probably could have talked me into buying his jersey just because, he is such a popular name. It would have been fun to own. But you're right. It's not the same Odell Beckham we saw with the Giants. He could potentially get back there. There's a lot of pieces in the Rams offense. And you talked about, are they much better? It's interesting that before Odell Beckham was signed with the Rams, they were plus 800 in terms of betting to win the Super Bowl. They signed Odell Beckham. They're still plus 800. So even Vegas didn't even didn't even move the needle for Vegas. So just something to keep your mind on.
To add a little snippet in here, to be fair, if Odell went to the Packers, I would say it moves the needle. I would say they get better because right now it's even if I don't view Odell as that much better or that great right now, he is still a decent receiver. And right now I feel like the Packers have Devontae Adams and that's it. Everybody else, I mean, they have other guys that could step up, but for the most part, they're all just names at this point. Nobody has really taken that step onto the next level to be great. If Odell can even show a hint of his great status of old, the Packers get 2 receivers in that offense with Aaron Jones. I think it would have taken a step up for them. And I think he actually would have been heavily used in Green Bay. You have Devontae Adams, who's double, triple covered almost every play. That leaves people... that leaves coverage off of Odell on the other side. He would have gotten heavily used. So I think he would have moved the needle for Green Bay. I don't think he does anything for the Rams.
Yeah, I will say one more thing before we wrap up and get into what everyone's probably actually listening for. I do know there was some reports that Odell Beckham didn't feel like the Packers were going all in. They didn't they didn't bring the full used car salesman pitch. They probably told him the truth that this offense still runs through Devonta Adams. This offense still relies on the run game. We're going to use Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Like, you're a complementary piece. Like, you have to buy into your role there. And you mentioned our other receivers. They might not be huge name options, but they all have a role and they all play it very well. Marquez Valdez-Scantling's a deep guy. Randall Cobb's the security blanket. Alan Lazard's the best blocking wide receiver in the NFL, and he has sure hands for in tough situations. They all play roles. So maybe that there wasn't some aspect of it that, Odell Beckham wanted to be felt more like a superstar, and the Rams did better at courting him that way. He gets to go out in L.A. with his friend LeBron James. Von Miller was FaceTiming, the new guy they acquired. That apparently them going out and being so aggressive was a big factor in why he picked the Rams. To me, the better situation was in Green Bay. It may sound biased. I'll still root for Odell Beckham, except when he's playing the Packers, because I did enjoy watching him play on the field. He is definitely a super talent when he was at his prime, and hopefully he can get back there. I mean, it's better for the NFL when Odell Beckham is playing at a high level.
Okay, and we'll see if he does end up playing to a higher level. We'll talk a little bit more about the situation of how the offense could shake out when we get to that game, but it's not until our Monday Night Football preview. We got to start with the 1 o'clock games first and open up our Week 10 preview. And I guess actually before we start 1 o'clock games, we should talk about bye weeks. So byes this week, we got the Chicago Bears, the Cincinnati Bengals, the New York Giants, and the Houston Texans. So now to the 1 o'clock games. We either have a blowout or an upset coming here. The Buffalo Bills traveling to the New York Jets. The Jets have seemed to like to knock off big teams so far this year. But fantasy-wise, why don't we start off with the Bills, because there's big news in the tight end market that Dawson Knox does not have an injury tag. He was a full participant on Thursday. He's expected to be back in full this week. Somebody throw right back on the dartboard because of how good he was doing before his hand injury?
I think he's
Absolutely.
more than a dartboard, to be honest with you. I think he's unless you have one of the big three or big four, Dawson Knox was so heavily used and such a big piece that I think if you have him, unless you have a bigger option, you put him in your lineup. I think he's better than a dart throw. And to be fair, I think he might be what the Bills were missing. I think the Bills' offense has been sputtering of late, and I think they could really take a step up having that big, sure-handed guy like Dawson Knox. And if their offense gets rolling like old, that means Bills are going to be putting up a lot more points, and that could really start opening things up for guys like Emmanuel Sanders again, Stephon Diggs, maybe even Cole Beasley. I think the Bills as a whole are going to take a step forward with Dawson Knox back.
100% agree with Snyder. I don't normally get a 100% agree with Snyder, but I'm going to agree with him on the Dawson Knox. The team was averaging 35 points. Prior to his injury, they scored 35 points the whole time he was out. He's that guy that, he gets a first down, he keeps drives alive. He might not always have the big flashy numbers, but he's reliable. And I did give you the nugget on Tuesday. He is on Josh Allen's fantasy team. So take that for a grain of salt. So, I mean, he's probably looking for him a little bit extra in the end zone if it's a close matchup. So Dawson Knox, definitely in my starting lineups, unless like you have Travis Kelce. Then I'm not going to start Dawson Knox, but you should probably trade one then.
Great question, because actually I got a start-sit question about Dawson Knox. So Dawson Knox or Kyle Pitts?
We'll see what the matchups this week. We got
Pitts against Dallas.
Pitts against Dallas, against the Jets. See, the Jets are a weird team because they really are one of the hardest teams against the passer. And I feel like Atlanta's offense is lacking so heavily that Pitts is becoming a huge, huge piece. I would tend to lean Pitts personally. But honestly, depending on how bad your team is, you honestly play both. Put one in the flex, depending on who you have.
Flex and a tight end. Cody, anything to
Yeah,
add?
I think I have to lean Pitts that one too. Like if I'm just trying to do like a quick rankings in my head, like I'd probably have Pitts at 5, Knox at 6. Like I don't think that either of them would be bad plays by any means, but if I'm doing the quick ranking in my head, Pitts would be like one spot ahead.
Okay. Good to know there. And I mean, I think we're pretty much starting everyone else we normally would on Buffalo, but on the Jets side, I want to talk a little wide receiver because we had a big game out of Elijah Moore last week, and I do believe Corey Davis is still on track to miss this week. Without Corey Davis, are you confident sticking with an Elijah Moore?
See, the interesting thing is it also depends on the quarterback situation, and the Jets did name Mike White the starter. And guys, I feel weird about this. I've said it before, but I almost feel like I'm more confident starting Jets receivers with Mike White as the quarterback than I am with Zach Wilson. I don't know why. I just feel like Mike White must have some kind of leadership or something that they try to rally around
They
him.
were giving us more with White, which makes no sense.
I like Elijah Moore this week. I mean, I don't love him. I like him more as like a wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 2. So I would probably aim more towards a flex depending on who you have. I'm not huge on him, especially against the Bills' stout defense. But you got to also think about game script. And as long as this game goes in normally and not like the Bills Jags last week, the Bills should go up early. The Jets should be throwing most of the game to try to catch up, which really does open the door for a guy like Elijah Moore, who is that big play threat.
Yeah, I think I would, I mean, if you're stuck in a tough situation, but I think I would pivot away from the Jets wide receivers. I know Mike White was named the starter, but he didn't finish the game last Thursday. And that's, kind of when they started putting up a ton of points and made the Colts game pretty interesting there. So I'm not completely sold on the Mike White experience. So that goes for Elijah Moore, Jamison Crowder. Those guys I'm definitely trying to pivot away from if I could.
Okay. And I think I did miss on the Buffalo side. We had a limited participation in practice on Thursday from Zach Moss. So anybody who was thinking about that spot started Devin Singletary might have to pump the brakes. But I think that's pretty much all we need from Bills Jets. We can move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to the Washington football team. We can start on the Bucs side. Cody, I see you have a note for the Buccaneers injury report. What are you looking at?
I just have on the rundown I just gave everybody the injury report. So it was just so that we have it here to reference, so I didn't have to look it up when you guys asked me a question. So I don't really have anything too big to report off the injury report. But the biggest thing in the Bucs is who's going to be playing at wide receiver. Chris Godwin might not be active. Antonio Brown is out of his walking boot, but still not expected to play. So it seems like a great week for Mike Evans. And it also could be an interesting week for a guy like Tyler Johnson. I know it's a guy that Brady likes. He doesn't get as many opportunities, but if both AB and Chris Godwin are down, it could be a guy that's probably not even widely owned that you could potentially sneak into your lineup.
Absolutely, Cody. I agree with you there. You also, you got to think about the tight ends. Do you start any of those tight ends with the receivers week?
Well, I know Gronk is also somebody who's missing practice, and I feel like we had some decent games out of OJ Howard and Cameron Brate without Gronk. No Gronk, if that does happen, and weakened wide receivers, I think that might be a good week to take a stab at one of those other tight ends. And I hate having to choose between the two because you're either going to get the 2 touchdown game out of Brate or you're going to get OJ Howard showing who OJ Howard is and why he should be freed. So it's a dart throw. But if there's no Gronk, take a stab at whoever you're more confident in.
Yeah, I look at these tight ends similar to how I do the Cleveland Browns with Austin Hooper and David Njoku. It's too hard to gauge on which guy's going to be relevant in the red zone or in between the 20s. That's why if I had to play a guy that was missing, I would pivot more towards a guy like Tyler Johnson over, taking a hope on a touchdown for Cameron Brate or OJ Howard.
Okay. And then moving over to the Washington side, I feel like we almost always have to talk about Washington running backs. Are you any more confident in Gibson this week? Where are you thinking?
No, the Bucs are one of the best teams against the run, and Gibson is constantly limited. I would fade Gibson at any possibility this week.
Yes, Gibson, if you checked out the couchgms.com, he is one of the sit options, I believe. You think I would know 100%, but if not, he was in heavy consideration to be one of the sit options. Like Tyler said, he just hasn't lived up to it. He was very close to being my disappointment of the year on Tuesday when we did that for the midseason review. A guy you expected a lot out, drafting him in the second round. He has just been too injured to stay healthy enough on the field full time. It's been a bit of a disappointment, and I don't see it getting better this week.
Okay, so then we're talking about fading Gibson. They could end up being down in this game, you would think. Is this a good game to flex J.D. McKissick, hoping you're getting some passing game and maybe he gets a couple carries as well?
Also, no. If you're in a position where you need to play J.D. McKissick, I think your season's probably in the toilet and you're trying to build yourself back out. I don't like J.D. McKissick. I feel like there's enough fringe running backs that if you're really that desperate, you can pick somebody up. Obviously, Devontae Freeman would have been a good one before the Thursday night game. And there's more. Contact us if you're really not sure, but I would not start J.D. McKissick. As far as like startable players on Washington, just because of game script, I like Terry McLaurin. He's been kind of wishy-washy this year. He hasn't been that consistent, solid guy that we remember from him. I'm still starting him if I have him. Other than that, man, I don't love a lot about Washington against the Bucs defense. I have a bad feeling it's going to be a blowout.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be quite a full-on blowout, but with the Bucs coming off of a bye, it doesn't seem like it's a great matchup. Yeah, McKissick. I mean, I know he's had 9 points last week, 11 points 2 weeks ago, so he has been putting up decent numbers, but like that's pretty much his ceiling at that point. So, there is probably guys out there that you can play as potential options. The only reason I would even look at him if you are in a full point PPR, I mean, he does have 8 receptions in two of his last 3 games. So, I mean, that's 8 points right there for a running back. But if you're half point PPR standard, I'd pivot off of McKissick as well.
Okay, I think that pretty much wraps that up. So we talked a little bit about the Falcons and Kyle Pitts earlier. We can move on to them facing the Dallas Cowboys. So we do like Pitts, obviously. And this might be a good week for Matt Ryan, you say here, Cody?
Yeah, I think it is a good week for Matt Ryan. I think it's a good week for both quarterbacks. Matt Ryan has been playing very well over the last 5 weeks. I think we often forget or overlook the Falcons because they started off so abysmal. They weren't a very good team. It's like, oh, that's an easy win. And they're turning around here. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, they're currently sitting at the 7th seed in the NFC. So they have something to fight for. It could be a good matchup. The Cowboys, their offense is very good, but their defense still has struggled at times. This could be definitely a shootout matchup. Probably not like the one we saw 2 years ago where Younghoe Koo made 2 onside kicks in a row. That was an impressive game. Maybe we'll get at least one this week. But back to Matt Ryan, I do think he is definitely a viable starting option. And that goes for Cordarrelle Patterson too. I mean, that's the guy he looks for the most. So he's another guy that you should keep in your lineups.
Yeah, you say we often forget about Matt Ryan. Well, not me, man. I've been a Matt Ryan truther for the last 3 years, and every time I do, there's just silence on this podcast. 'Cause it's like, it's Matt Ryan, man. It's whatever. But I'm glad he's finally getting some recognition.
He's just kind of been wishy-washy. But hey.
And depending on who you have at quarterback, especially with the buys and everything, you might need to start a guy like Matt Ryan. So, but as far as the Falcons, yeah, you got Matt Ryan. Kyle Pitts is definitely a start for me. You're definitely going to start Cordarrelle Patterson. I'm not really liking Alameda Zaccheaus or Russell Gage just yet. I want to see one of them, become a more solid option for Matt Ryan. See one of them take a step forward over the other before I trust one of them as a potential flex option. So as of right now, just starting those two. I'm also fading Mike Davis if you haven't already. This guy has been bad this year.
Man, it's so bad. I've seen Mike Davis dropped in a lot of leagues, and I can't blame him. And I know it's bad when the Mike Davis truther over here to start the season has not even really wanted to add him. It's been bad, but I think a lot of it has to do with Cordarrelle Patterson getting most of the meaningful work out of the backfield. But I think that pretty much covers the Falcons. We can move on to the Dallas Cowboys side. We got to talk Cowboys wide receivers every single week. So you got CeeDee Lamb, you got Amari Cooper. Are you starting Michael Gallup against the Falcons defense that has been poor?
No.
I probably would put him this week because it'd be his first week back to game action. I think he is a viable starting option in the future. I think they can support 3 wide receivers, but not the first week back. I think they're going to ease him in. Cedric Wilson is still look good, and then not Malik Turner. That's not his name. Is that his name? The guy that scored 2 touchdowns for no reason last week.
Yeah,
Now I'm blanking on his name. Number 17 for the Cowboys. You're not going to start him either. Don't chase those fantasy points. But I think the top 2, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, should be good to go.
Yeah, in all honesty, we also got to think we are coming close to the trade deadline for most fantasy leagues. And if you have one of the Cowboys' star receivers, if you have an Amari Cooper, if you have a CeeDee Lamb, even if you have the tight end Dalton Schultz, I just feel like there's getting to be a lot of mouths to feed over there. I would not mind trying to trade one of them high and getting somebody else that could be more consistent down the stretch. You got to think playoff time if you're in that stretch. And if you're trying to make a push for the playoffs right now, you got to get a guy who's more consistent. So I don't mind trying to sell some of these Cowboys high right now.
Definitely. I could see that. That's great advice there. Someone who you might have thought about trading him for until we had some bad news would be Julio Jones. Tyler, give us the update on Julio as we talk some Saints at Titans.
Yes. Okay, so yesterday would have been Wednesday. Wednesday's practice was the first time this entire season that Julio Jones was not on the injury report at all. And then Thursday, he tweaked his hammy at the end of practice, was running a route. At the end of the route, came up a little lame and grabbed his hammy and looked pissed. So it looks like that nagging hammy injury just won't go away. I know Cody hinted towards it. Our last podcast, he kept saying hammy. I really thought he was finally over it. Apparently not. Look, if you have Julio in fantasy, just stash him right now. I don't know if I'd be going to trade for him, like I said in the last podcast, with the fact that he cannot seem to stay healthy. But I'm not dropping him either. This does open up more passing for A.J. Brown. I think that he is definitely going to be the number 1 target again. As far as tight ends, you're not taking any of them because they have 3 of them that they use all 3. There's really no other receiver that I would try to go out and pick up. And running backs, look, I love AP. I think down the road, AP is going to be a good startable option. But right now, we don't know who that running back is going to be. Titans said they're going to roll with the hot hand. So if Dante Foreman comes out and runs well, it's going to be him. If McNichols comes out and runs well, it's going to be him. So just fade all of the Titans running backs until that becomes more solid. Right now, start A.J. Brown, start Ryan Tannehill if you need a quarterback. Other than that, don't start any Titans.
Yeah, I would actually even consider not starting Ryan Tannehill this week, just because the lack of weapons. The Saints' defense is still a top 10 defense in the league. They're top 10 against the quarterbacks in fantasy, so there's probably some other matchups out there that would be better. Maybe you're unfortunate enough to not be able to, or maybe you're in like a double or super flex 2 quarterback league and you have to play Ryan Tannehill. But if you're in your standard 1 quarterback league, 12, 10 players, I think there's some better options out there.
And one other person to look for on the Titans side is potentially that Titans defense. Man, they were bad to start the year, and they were a fantasy defense that nobody owned, but now they're a top 5 fantasy defense. They have broken 10 points 4 out of the last 5 weeks. And guys, they're scheduled down the road. They have the Jags, they have the Texans twice, the 49ers, the Patriots. They have the Saints this week with Trevor Siemian as the starting quarterback, or Taysom Hill, and potentially no Alvin Kamara. So the Titans' schedule is real easy down the stretch. They are a great defense to go out and get if you're looking playoff time. But, I mentioned it. We might as well go ahead and talk about it. Alvin Kamara is not practicing. I would actually, if you have the free space available, go ahead and go pick up Mark Ingram. He's been heavily using that offense. He fits right into that offense, and he might be a guy that you can just go ahead and start if Kamara is ruled out.
Definitely. I know there's plenty of running back needy teams out there right now because of all the injuries and bye weeks. I'm one of them that would consider, except for I started Devontae Freeman on Thursday. But exactly, I mean, especially if Kamara doesn't go or if he's limited at all, I love that play. And the knee injury that Kamara has was called mild, but that does not mean he's not going to miss time. And we have to wait and see his Friday practice participation to have any idea how that's going to go. Other than that, on the Saints, it's just they're still a fantasy wasteland. I don't know if there's anyone else I really like to start there, especially now without Jameis Winston and they're still not starting Taysom Hill. I guess it's tough.
Yeah, and like Tyler mentioned, this defense is pretty good. I wouldn't start Taysom Hill, even if he does get the last minute nod. Yeah, the Saints. I mean, Kamara is the guy, and if he's not out there, you can take a chance on Mark Ingram. But again, just temper expectations. He's not Alvin Kamara, so there will be a little bit of a drop off, even if he gets the full time role.
And guys, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really trust any of the Saints wide receivers at this point, with the revolving door at quarterback and the drop off in offense. Do you guys disagree? Are you starting any of them?
I just feel like I never know who's going to be the guy that week. So there's no one that's getting consistent performance. So if you are like desperate or looking for a daily fantasy steal, you take a stab at either a Traquan Smith or a Marquez Callaway. But I don't like in a redraft league or a dynasty league, whatever, where you're trying to look for somebody that gives you consistent points. It's just there's nobody there that fits that role.
Yeah, I agree with that. So why don't we move on to another game featuring two AFC South teams, the Jacksonville Jaguars that shocked the Buffalo Bills last week, and the Indianapolis Colts, Tyler's arch nemesis. Wow, I had to make a joke, and I can't even say the word. So let's just move on and get past that moment and talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. They won the game, but they only scored 9 points, so it wasn't like there was a ton of fantasy output. Is there any guys you're considering starting on the Jacksonville side?
James Robinson.
Yeah, James Robinson definitely. Marvin Jones is like a borderline flex if you're desperate.
Dan the Man Arnold.
Yeah, I don't even trust Trevor Lawrence, honestly. I'm not really starting any of the Jacksonville Jaguars, except for, I'm not even starting their kicker. I'm just going to go ahead with James Robinson, and that's about it.
Yeah, and James Robinson is still dealing with a little bit of a heel injury. He was limited Thursday, so that is still something to monitor in that matchup. Dan Arnold, he could be a spot flex. He got 8 points last week in half-point PPR. He seems to slowly be building that chemistry. It's just if the Jags are going to find the end zone, might be a little bit tough, but seems to be a guy that they're favoring. So let's move to the Indianapolis Colts. They have a lot more fantasy relevant guys. You have, Jonathan Taylor, who is now the leading rusher in the AFC. And I thought it was very interesting. This is not fantasy related, but somebody asked him what it would feel like to win the rushing title this year. And I just felt like that was like a loaded question. I was like, has he even still passed Derrick Henry yet? Like,
he's 116 yards behind Derrick Henry still.
So he's supposed to win, but like he's not even leading it right now, and it's only because Derrick Henry got hurt. But he's definitely balling out. He's looking like the guy that we expected from him last year. He's finally coming on strong in his sophomore season. George, I'll let you talk about Michael Pittman because I know, and you can talk about Carson Wentz too, your two favorites.
Well, I think Carson Wentz has kind of been coming on into a good spot start these last couple of weeks, and now against Jacksonville, who has just been a struggling defense. I think that's a great spot start quarterback for you guys to find. He's still on a lot of free agent markets, I've noticed. So great job, great spot start for Carson Wentz. Michael Pittman is just a mainstay in my lineup now. I think he's locked in that wide receiver 2 status, and I don't see anything that can change that. So I don't even know if it's really much of a talk about Michael Pittman anymore. I think he's locked in.
Yeah, guys, you have Carson Wentz, you have Michael Pittman, you got Jonathan Taylor. But I just want to give a warning out to everybody listening. Be careful. This is the makings of a trap game. It's a divisional game, which always seems to cause issues with teams. The Jags seem to have the Colts number. If you remember, they only had one win all of last season, and it was against the Colts in week 1. They just held the Bills to 6 points. So they have the possibilities to actually hold the Colts within check. This could be a potential trap game. This could be a game where the Colts really underperform. So I'm not saying go ahead and bench all Colts because the Jags are going to be the best team in the league this week, but just beware. Don't go starting every Colt you got because they're facing a terrible Jags team.
Just start the mainstays.
Just the mainstays.
Okay.
I will say, in one league, I do have to start Mo Alley Cox. So I understand.
It's a tight end. That's a dartboard throw.
Tight end dartboard. It's fine.
So sometimes you just got to do it. It was that, or I don't even remember the options. They were really bad. I've been struggling at tight end in that league. So sometimes it's okay. We're right there with you. We think we know a lot because that's why we do a podcast. But we all have that one team that we're not proud of that's not doing great. And the team I have to start, Mo Alley Cox, is definitely that team.
All right, well, now that we got some Mo Alley Cox in here, let's go ahead and move on to the next game. We got the Detroit Lions, who weren't able to lose a game because they were on a bye week, so congratulations to them for not losing. And they face the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to go ahead and just start us with the Lions because there's really not much to talk about. They do have DeAndre Swift. He is definitely worth starting. If you have him, you're going to play him. He's a solid back, plus he catches passes, so even if they go down in the game, he will still be used. But as far as receivers, look, they just made a claim on Josh Reynolds, cut by the Titans. Their other top receiver right now is Khalif Raymond, who last season was cut by the Titans. So, the Titans' reject receivers are really going to Detroit right now. I'm not going for either of them. I'm not starting either of them. If you're super, super deep league where you have nothing else, maybe you throw a Khalif Raymond in there. But look, hopefully you're not in that league. You're not in that situation. The only other Lion we're starting is TJ Hawkinson. And even I'm a little concerned about him this week. I have a bad feeling that he's going to have a bad week. I don't know if it's just my gut talking to me or if it's that Steelers defense against tight ends, but I don't love Hawkinson this week.
I just think as much as Hawkinson has to be in the top, I can't say top tier, second tier tight ends that you're starting every week because of how he's the only guy on the offense and how skilled he is. The fact that he's the only really relevant skill player on the offense means he's going to disappear some weeks because defenses are going to bracket him out. So you just got to hope he scores a touchdown in weeks like that. He's going to have weeks where he scores 3 just because of defenses saying, well, we're just not going to let Hawk beat us. But then there's other weeks where he's going to get 10 targets and score you 15, 20 fantasy points. So he's not someone you can bench because you can never really predict when he's going to have that bust week. But you're right. This could be one of those weeks where he just does disappear and it stinks, but you have to stick with it.
Yeah, and speaking of stick with it, I know it's a tough matchup, but I still think you roll out DeAndre Swift in there as well. He's probably a guy that if you have potentially, could move him. You might not play him this week because it is a tough matchup again. But Jamal Williams is on the injury report. DeAndre Swift's the guy. He gets a lot of work in the passing game and the running game. He's a top fantasy running back at the moment. So despite the poor offense, definitely can roll DeAndre Swift out there, in my opinion. Real quick before we move on to the Steelers, I do want to know, what are your guys' thoughts, not on playing Josh Reynolds, but because he did just get waived, they put in a waiver claim. They've been struggling at wide receiver. Is this a guy that you might be trying to grab a week early if you have the roster space so you're not fighting him on waivers next week? Do you like that move? Or, Snyder, maybe this is more for you because you got to watch him the first half of the season. Is Josh Reynolds just not the guy we thought he was in LA?
Look, Josh Reynolds is a solid receiver. He can make plays. He did have some injuries this season, which held him out of games a little bit. But his main issue was he didn't do enough to separate himself from the other receivers in the Titans locker room, which, I mean, if you're on a team like the Bucs and you're wide receiver 6 because they have Godwin, Evans, all those guys, then yeah, I kind of get it. But after AJ and Julio, who's been injured every week, they had Chester Rodgers, Marcus Johnson, these guys that you're not even, Nick Westbrook-Akina, guys that most people have never heard of, and he couldn't outplay them. He was a healthy scratch because he wasn't doing enough to put himself beyond them. I did get to watch him in person in that Jets game that I'm still having PTSD about, and he did make some crazy good catches, but he's not getting open. He's struggling to create space. Once he does get open, he's making great catches, but yeah, he's just not able to create the separation from corners this year. I'm not sure if it is a lack of mobility based off his leg injuries he had this season, but if it's me, now that I've rambled on forever, I would not go for Josh Reynolds just yet. I want him to prove that he can get open before I'm going for him.
I like it. I mean, I agree with you there as well. I just think that on top of the fact that it's a bad offense, maybe they just can't sustain a wide receiver that's fantasy relevant, every single week. So it's tough. I would rather see him do it and fight the waivers than put him up on a roster spot like we did Amon-Ra St. Brown, and now we're cutting him because he hasn't done anything. But we can move on to the Pittsburgh side of the ball, and I think we got to talk wide receivers there as well. So Deonte Johnson's a lock in your lineup, but a man who we were expecting so much more out of, and he's just been banged up and hasn't done much in these recent weeks without Juju, is Chase Claypool. And again, he's on the injury report, not practicing with a toe injury. I don't know if there's any wide receivers after him that I would even think about targeting, but say Claypool does play, is he somebody you're still confident putting in your lineup knowing he's banged up and just hasn't been performing?
No, I'm not playing Claypool, and I've actually heard he's going to miss a few weeks. So I know he hasn't been officially put on the IR yet. They might be trying to see if he can be back in week 3, not miss week 3 games, but I don't expect him to play this week. And to your point, then I wouldn't go out there and throw James Washington in my lineup. Claypool is a special talent. James Washington, he's been there. He might catch a touchdown here and there, but it's too unpredictable to go with. The guy that's really going to benefit is the tight end, Pat Freiermuth. He's come on strong. He had 2 touchdowns on the Monday night game. He probably won't replicate that in this matchup, but that's a guy that Ben Roethlisberger is quickly making connection with. Without Claypool now, he becomes the second passing option.
Yeah, and I think that this team is really starting to emulate what the Titans have been doing the last couple of years, where this team runs through the running back. It is all about the running back. Najee Harris, the whole team is on his back. It's all going through him right now. And if they have priority to anybody, it's going to be him. If they need to throw the ball, it's going to be to Deonte Johnson right now. And I agree with Cody. I think Pat Freiermuth is target number 2 now. But I think that they're going to become, especially with Roethlisberger looking not great this year, he doesn't really have the arm strength that he used to have. I believe that they're going to keep running the ball. They're going to keep focusing on Najee Harris and only throw when they really need to. And when the game runs through a running back like that so heavily, you don't need more than 2 target options. So I think after Freiermuth and Deonte Johnson, nobody else is really fantasy relevant catching the ball.
A big change from last year when Pittsburgh just wasn't running the ball with James Conner, and that's why they had 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers. We're now seeing so much more usage of the running back, even in the passing game, that has just been depleting all of those targets that we saw last year. But speaking of running games through running backs,
well, hang on,
the Browns do that. Oh, okay.
Before you move on, you do have to make a mention that Najee Harris is nicked up. He got demoted to limited practice on Thursday. He's dealing with a little bit of a foot injury. That's definitely something to monitor because how much they rely on him. If he can go, or if he's only able to go 50% of the game, it could cause the offense to become pretty stagnant and then even hurt guys like Deonte Johnson or, Pat Freiermuth. So just another guy you have to talk about or watch the rest of the week with the injuries.
That's a good point. And what I was going to go transition into is the Browns, who are traveling to the New England Patriots. They have a major running back situation here. As we know, Nick Chubb is on the COVID list. He still has a chance to be back for Sunday, but if I had to guess, I would say we're probably going to be missing him. I hope you all went out there and grabbed Dearness Johnson on the waiver wire because he's somebody who's going to be an instant start if we do not have a Nick Chubb. And I also do not believe that we're going to see Kareem Hunt back this week. I think he is eligible to come off injured reserve, but he is not practicing yet, so it's very, very unlikely. The Dearness Johnson game rears its head again, and even though New England might be a little bit of a better defense, I think it's still a solid play here.
Yeah, and Dearness Johnson might. I think George and Tyler and I were all talking about this yesterday. Dearness Johnson might even be a play if Chubb does come back. I mean, because he'll be out a whole week. He will have dealt with COVID. They might not have given him a full workload. It could be an option there. And then, like you mentioned, Kareem Hunt's not there. Demetric Felton is also on the COVID list. So, really, right now, Dearness Johnson is the only running back, and they're hopeful to get some other guys. So he'll be a big part of the game plan with or without Chubb. So I think you can be started if Chubb isn't there, but you can still but just bring your expectations down a little bit.
Yeah, and you also need to look, we talk about great game script a lot. When you have a bad team facing a really good team, they're going to throw the ball a lot. When you have a good team facing a bad team, they're going to run the ball a lot. But the other thing you got to look at past game script is also game situation. And right now, Baker Mayfield is banged up. He is hurting. He has a really bad non-throwing shoulder. So they're probably not going to want him to drop back into to throw as often as they normally would. They're probably going to try to limit that so they don't kill their quarterback. OBJ is gone. They do have Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was worth an add if you wanted to go get him on the waiver, but they're not in the situation where they should be throwing the ball like we originally expected from this Browns offense. I think they're going to really try to hammer home the run, maybe even more than usual, which is saying a lot with them having Hunt and Chubb before. I think they're going to go really hard with the run game right now. So I do think that both running backs will be very heavily utilized.
Definitely could see that. And I think even though we did add Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's probably not somebody I want to play this week. And you may be desperate enough that you have to start Jarvis Landry, but I like avoiding him a little bit as well. Moving on to the Patriots side, broken record. I mean, we're probably starting Damian Harris. Is there any other running backs you like? Do you like Ramondre Stevenson? There was another little run on the waiver wire for him again this week just because he had his game where he got 10 rushes, but then now he's going to get another 3 rush game, I feel like.
Well, don't forget.
Yeah, you also have to keep in mind that Cody was probably going exactly where I'm going to go here, but they also have Brandon Bolden, and Brandon Bolden has been really heavily used in the passing game. He's been that pass catching back, so Damian Harris has been pulled out of the game a lot for Brandon Bolden, and Ramondre Stevenson has looked really good. I mean, I know Stevenson is questionable right now. I expect him to play, but what do I know? So, yeah, they have 3 running backs, and they also have the toughest running back schedule the rest of the way. In all honesty, if I'm a Damian Harris owner, I'm not worried about trying to start him. I'm worried about trying to trade him while he still has value while I can.
Yeah, not a bad option to trade Damian Harris. I was actually going to bring up Brandon Bolden, but for a different reason, because Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are both out with a concussion. They haven't practiced at all Wednesday or Thursday, so that's something to monitor. Brandon Bolden might be not just a passing catch guy, he might be the workhorse back this week if those guys can't get out of the concussion protocol.
Let me just check really quick and see if there's anybody else to watch on that depth chart. I know we have Brandon Bolden. I wasn't there like a JJ Taylor. We tried to call him JT Taylor. It's JJ Taylor. He'd be the other guy probably that would be splitting work in that situation. So maybe another DFS play, maybe if not someone you play as a desperation flex. I would probably just like him more in DFS. But if they're really going to have running backs missing time, it's a team that does like to run the ball. You just never know where the carries are going to go. So that might actually make it more predictable if they have 2 running backs missing time.
Alrighty, well, let's move on to our 4 o'clock games. We have the Minnesota Vikings versus George's second favorite team, the Los Angeles Chargers. George, why don't you kick it off with the Chargers since that's your real favorite team?
No. I don't think there's too much different to report on the Chargers than there was in the past few weeks, except Mike Williams now threw up 2 dud games in a row, and he's somebody that, even though I think he's going to turn it around, he's showing more of what he was before this season. It's a little disappointing. He was somebody we thought we could rely on every single week, and now you have to start maybe playing the matchups or just trying to hope that you play him the right games where he's not going to bust. With that being said, I think I'm still probably going to keep him in my lineup this week because a lot of teams might not have a choice with how much they were relying on him as a wide receiver 2 after how the season was going. Other than that, Eckler's good to go. Keenan Allen, keep going. Same with Justin Herbert. And I don't think there's really anyone else to add in there. Tight end dartboard possibility maybe for Parham because they seem to want to target him in the red zone. But I think he's probably lower end on the dartboard because there's other tight end options in LA.
Yeah,
Making
and
a lot of sense there.
if you have Donald Parham on your team or in your lineup, I mean, you have a great, terrible fantasy team name of Chicken Parham right there, ready to use if you need to.
Adding him.
But anyway, moving on to the Vikings, because I think they're more interesting to talk about. You have Justin Jefferson, you have Adam Thielen. Let's get past all that. But, guys, are you worried at all with the news that broke about Dalvin Cook? Where's your thought process right now with him?
Well, let me say, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to affect him this season. Like, you could end up seeing more coming out in the offseason, or if more legal things come out when we start to figure out which side is really at fault, whether it be he or the ex-girlfriend that is accusing him. But I don't think it's going to affect him this season. But it did make me go to action on waivers and add Alexander Mattison as a just in case. Because number one, I already think he should be owned, especially if you're a Dalvin Cook owner. Not owning Alexander Mattison, it's just missing fantasy points for the weeks he does miss, because he's going to miss a couple of weeks here and there. It just happens. But we know he can be a boom running back if anything happens. And if it does happen that Dalvin Cook goes on the commissioner's exempt list because things get ugly in the next week or two, you're going to hate missing out or hate having to go into the waiver wire rush for Madison. So if he's still out there in your leagues, add him. I don't think it's going to affect Dalvin Cook this season, but in case it does, you need to be prepared. You need to be the person that has that leg up on your league and has Madison.
I'm still irritated. In our league of record, I've held Madison since week 1. And then I ran out of players that I could cut. And I had to cut him this week with full intentions of picking him right back up on waivers. And George would never have picked him up except on Tuesday night, the news broke. And I'm not trying to make a joke out of the situation. The situation is definitely 100% very serious. There's conflicting reports on who is causing injury to who. All that needs to get worked out. I do think George does have a point, though. I don't think it'll truly affect him this season in terms of availability. Like, prime example, we're seeing with Deshaun Watson. He has a harassment case against him. That's slow moving. He hasn't been placed on the commissioner's exempt list yet. We're halfway through the season. I don't expect that for Dalvin Cook unless there is something major that takes turn in this case. But I do agree with George. Madison needs to be owned, and I'm not irritated in the situation. I'm irritated that George got him back after I've held him for 9 weeks and just had to cut him to get a guy to start. And I couldn't even pick up a kicker because I literally couldn't cut anybody, and I lost by 4 points. So I lost by 4 points, and I lost Madison. It was a tough week in fantasy for me.
Don't be a Cody.
And guys, look, to be honest with you, we like to think that we get the news pretty quickly, but in reality, these teams know what's going on before we ever do. So monitor the team. If you see that, the Vikings just so happened to sign one of their practice squad running backs to the roster this week for no good reason, like, it might be a sign of something to come. The teams know what's going on before we ever will. So monitor the team. But as of right now, they're moving forward, playing as usual. The way it looks to start is that Dalvin Cook's not even at fault. And until it starts to switch to Dalvin Cook is the aggressor and not the victim, I don't think we're going to see any kind of action coming to him from the team or from the NFL. So as of right now, you are good to roll with Dalvin Cook, in my opinion.
Definitely, but always be the most prepared franchise in your league. But I think that's enough Vikings then for there. We can move on to the Carolina Panthers and their whole quarterback situation, traveling to the Arizona Cardinals. Not a great matchup already for the Panthers. And then you have PJ Walker starting this week. You probably have to start McCaffrey. I'm not saying you should bench McCaffrey regardless. He's good no matter what quarterback is in there. But DJ Moore is a great question because he started the season so hot. He was a lock for a wide receiver one in your lineups. He started to get the drops, and now he's got a backup quarterback who has not played many NFL snaps, going against one of the toughest defenses in the league. I'm in a situation where I have to start DJ Moore in the league because I don't have any other options. If you have a couple other of those decent flex options, do you think that you could bench DJ Moore?
You better have some good options.
Yeah, I agree with Cody there. You have to have some good options. I mean, look, DJ Moore is not that absolute must start that we saw at the beginning of the season, but he's still up there enough that, I mean, really, how deep are you that you're able to bench DJ Moore and feel happy about it?
Yeah, I agree. I think you'd have to have picked him as like wide receiver 3. Like you went no running backs and you got Pittman in the last round or something like that. Like that's how you'd feel confident like moving on from DJ Moore. But I do think he's still out there. But until otherwise, Robbie Anderson's out of your list. I know I talked Tommy Tremble a little bit with the Cam Newton news. Still not playing him. He's not on the dartboard yet either. So for me, it's just DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey as options in fantasy from the Carolina Panthers.
Okay, that makes sense. And then moving on to the Cardinals side, still a little wait and see on Kyler Murray, but I believe he could be back this week. And then I also don't have too much news on DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure, Cody, maybe you can try to fill us in while I'm talking here. Other than that, I mean, if we don't have a DeAndre Hopkins, or even if we do, are there any other wide receivers you like? I feel like we have this conversation every week. AJ Green was banged up, but he always seemed to be the first guy in there. Christian Kirk is an inconsistent kind of player. They're just such a tough team to read, even though they put up so many points. It's not like they hoist as many fantasy relevant players as like the Bills do on a given week.
Yeah, George, in the beginning of the season, you and I had this exact conversation. Who do you like after DeAndre Hopkins? And I went 100% Rondale Moore, and you went 100% Christian Kirk, and Cody threw in the don't forget about AJ Green. And, you know, I've completely changed tune. If I have to go with a guy after D-Hop, I like Christian Kirk at this point. Even if Kyler Murray can't go, it looked like even the backup quarterback, like Christian Kirk, I feel like he's been more the consistent option now lately. And I think he's one of the healthiest of their receivers. I think Rondale Moore will always have, you know, some kind of role in that offense. They're going to want to run the ball with him, pass the ball to him. They're going to want to get him involved because he's so dangerous. But if I have to start a guy after D-Hop, I'm going with Christian Kirk.
Yeah, if I hit you with the injury report real quick, Kyler Murray hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday, but I know reports out of there he's feeling better. He's going to probably try to go. DeAndre Hopkins hasn't practiced either with his hamstring. I am not confident he is going to play, and if he does, I could see it being very similar to how he was used in that Green Bay Arizona game a few Thursday nights ago, where he would come in on a third down, he would come on when they need a distraction. So if he's active, I would even keep him on the bench. It's crazy that's going to see, but DeAndre Hopkins, I would not play him this week. Rondale Moore, he has not practiced with a neck and concussion injury. AJ Green, this is super interesting. He was activated off the COVID list, but according to the injury report, he practiced Wednesday and then was limited on Thursday with an illness. So that's something to monitor there. I don't know if that was just like, you know, recovering from COVID. Maybe he was a little extra winded. Maybe he's doing his ramp up period, but I expect him to be out there. And that's the guy that I tend to like the most because he seems to get the red zone targets even when he doesn't know that it's a pass coming to him. But he seems to be guys that are getting the red zone targets. But that Arizona Cardinals, they're very good, but they're very banged up at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like AJ Green if he's going to go because he's the most likely receiver to play the DeAndre Hopkins role, the reliable hands receiver. Not that he is the same beast as the DeAndre Hopkins at this point in his career. He's the most likely to do that. And I like Christian Kirk if he's going to be the number 2. And I'm going to backtrack to what I said in the past. This could be the Andy Isabella breakout game, but I don't like it enough to play him in a redraft or a dynasty league, maybe a DFS play if you're not going to see DeAndre Hopkins and you're not going to see Rondale Moore. Maybe roll the dice on Andy Isabella in DFS, but that's it.
Yeah, I don't love the Andy Isabella play, but I will say that Andy Isabella is my absolute favorite person to trade for in Madden. The dude's got like 97 speed, great hands, and you could trade for him for like a 7th round pick or a backup offensive lineman. Like, the dude is so fun to trade for in Madden. So if you play Madden, you need a speedy receiver, go out and get Andy Isabella. That's where you need to get him.
And if you play Madden and you play with Snyder, you know that he only takes players with 97 speed or higher. So that's why he loves Andy Isabella so much, including offensive linemen. It's crazy.
97 speed O-lineman. Yeah, that sounds fun.
If that's what you would want. That's what you would want. But I think that's enough for that matchup. So we're going to pivot again now to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Denver Broncos. Can the Broncos complete a 2-week series of beating the NFC East? But let's start with Georgia's Eagles because I know he's rearing to go talking about his true number 1 team.
At least you keep giving me that and not trying to say the Chargers are my favorite team anymore. I'm glad it's
editor. Just cut that.
Bit.
Chargers are my favorite team. Can I get a soundbite of just that? Editors in the back, please. Thank you.
Moving on to the Eagles here. I think we had a really good discussion earlier in the week when we were talking waivers about the Eagles running backs and Jordan Howard. And I don't think it's going to be a situation where the Eagles are up, but I think the Eagles showed if they hang in games, they want to use more of a pure running back than a Boston Scott. If the Eagles fall behind, Boston Scott's going to be a very relevant back because he's somebody who can pop a top off or be a really good change of pace, catch some balls out of the backfield. But Jordan Howard, I think, is going to be the guy to get most of the carries, and that makes him a decent flex player. If you're looking for running backs to be an RB2, he could be a guy this week that could fill in for you. Boston Scott, I've faded to the point where I've even cut him in a league or two, but I just don't think I want to play him because I'm very scared about the way that they used him. Unless they would play like a team like the Lions, we're expecting to go up again. There's just not many teams I expect the Eagles to go way up on. Wide receivers, I did actually like what Devontae Smith did last week. I think if I'm worried about consistency there as well, but if him and Hurts really start to put it together, he could end up being somebody who becomes more of a mainstay in your lineup. The Broncos are a little bit of a tough defense. I would probably try to avoid Devontae Smith if I can help it, but there are worse plays at wide receiver if you are desperate for a wide receiver. And then obviously Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert are in your lineup most weeks just because of the situation at quarterback and tight end.
Yeah, I'm attributing the Eagles' backfield to being like the 49ers' backfield. You could play Elijah Mitchell. You could play Jordan Howard. They should get the volume, but I don't trust either backfield. I think they're the same in that sense. I'm not touching any of the running backs if I have the choice. And I'm not going to forget that the Eagles are the team that when they had Miles Sanders healthy, they let him carry the ball 3 times. So why am I supposed to suddenly believe that with Jordan Howard and Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell that they're going to keep running the ball? I mean, I know they have run the ball more with Miles Sanders out. Makes no sense. Way to go, Eagles. But yeah, I'm fading that backfield altogether if I had the choice. I just don't trust it.
I think the biggest thing with it, I totally get the skepticism, and I'm still a skeptic about it as well at times, but after the Thursday night game against Tampa Bay, the Eagles coaching staff said they stepped back and did a little self-scouting, and that's when they started to run the ball more than 10 times a game. And it's been working. They've actually had success. Miles Sanders was having a great first half before he got hurt in that game. So I think that the what have you done for me lately is why I feel a little bit more confident in Eagles running backs. But there is always that thing in my mind, too, that says, oh, this is going to be the game to go back to throwing 50 times, or the only person that's going to carry the ball is Jalen Hurts. So I get it. But for right now, I'm in on at least having one fantasy relevant back, and the most likely for that is Jordan Howard.
All right. Well, I think we've spent enough time on the Eagles. So, Cody,
absolutely,
we've already spent a lot of time on this podcast, so we could try to pick it up. Who is starting from the Broncos on your fantasy squad?
On my fantasy squad from the Broncos.
All right, just in fantasy in general. Let me rephrase that.
Yeah, I know what you meant. Um, I'm gonna pick Javonte Williams over Mike or Melvin Gordon this week. I think I mean, I know it's been close to 50-50 split, but I think Javonte Williams has started to pull away slightly just by what they're doing on the field. So I'd pick him over Melvin Gordon this week. Wide receiver wise, I'm going to roll out Jerry Jeudy, potentially flex Cortland Sutton. But this Eagles pass defense has been a lot better. They've been easier to run against and throw the ball. So there's not a ton of options I like on the Broncos. My favorite play probably is Javonte Williams.
That's a far cry from how it's been the last few weeks just because of the major split. But yeah, the Broncos wide receivers are almost doing the same thing the Broncos running backs did with just taking targets away from each other.
Mm-hmm. Not an easy team to pick apart, but we got one more 4 o'clock game, and it's with the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks. This should be a fun matchup. Russell Wilson will be back. Fingers crossed, Aaron Rodgers will be back. When I say fingers crossed, that's because he has to clear this ramp-up period over 3-day time that he can start doing virtually. But his first day back is Saturday. He has to prove that he is conditioned well enough to play in an NFL game. And it is worth noting that the Packers medical staff is notoriously known around the league as one of the most cautious medical staff. So there is a chance that they're like, you're not ready to go, and we see Jordan Love is here. But I'm going to, for the rest of this conversation, go under the assumption that Aaron Rodgers does take the snap, or take the ball off the first snap, whatever, however you want to word it. He's good. I wouldn't play him in the lineup. He's practiced once in like the last 15 days. But I'm sorry, but
it's really weird hearing you say that they are one of the most cautious medical staffs when they are the team that had Aaron Rodgers get carted off the field in the first game of the season, only to play the entire second half of the game a couple years ago. It's just funny to me to hear cautious and like carted, but he could play.
Well, I mean, they determined that he couldn't do any further damage. He played the whole season on a bad knee. He got surgery after, but they determined that it couldn't get any worse. It would just be pain management. So, but we've seen in years, Devontae Adams, he didn't want to play, or he wanted to play, and they held him out an extra week last year. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was pissed that he got put on IR, and then he ended up missing 4 games with a hamstring. Like, he wanted to play the next week. So that's what I mean when they're cautious. They have a very long-term outlook. But back to this week, Aaron Rodgers, not my starting lineup. I love the dude, but he's not in my starting lineup just because, like I mentioned, he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. He's been out there. You can still roll out Devontae Adams. He's still going to get his. Aaron Jones is a solid start, and I think A.J. Dillon is in flex consideration.
Is there any tight ends worth monitoring from the Packers now that Tunyon's done for the year?
No. I mean, no. Yeah. There's really not. There's not that you can start with any confidence. Like Mercedes Lewis, he's going to catch a touchdown or 2. But he's going to have like 3 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown. Like that's like his ceiling is 9 points. And until we see something out of Josiah DeGuara or a Dominique Daphne that's like, okay, they're starting to take over, though they're going to just be guys that catch a pass here or there.
Fair enough. Right.
Right.
I got to say, this game looked so much more exciting to me a few hours ago because the original reports were that Odell wanted to go to Seattle or Green Bay. And the original reports were he was going to wait till after Sunday to make his call on who to sign with. And I honestly believed that he wanted to go to Seattle, but figured, if they lose this week, they're probably out of it. So if they lose, he shouldn't go to Seattle. He should go to Green Bay. And if they win, they are in it. He should go to Seattle. So I honestly thought this was going to be the battle of winner gets Odell. And that makes this game so much more exciting than just your normal 4 o'clock football game.
Well, that anytime the Packers are on, it's a great game. And it's
yeah.
Sounds like some bias.
Never.
But on the Seattle side, Russell Wilson should be back, so that makes things a lot more exciting, especially if you're a Tyler Lockett owner. It's kind of like, finally, I could play Tyler Lockett. And I think DK
Metcalf Tyler Lockett's off the injury report.
You should have an uptick with DK Metcalf. Chris Carson might be returning from the IR. So the Seattle Seahawks offense might be getting a lot more exciting, might be getting back to normal real soon, guys. Maybe even this week.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't see Chris Carson back this week, I think that Seattle has been very cautious with him and will probably continue to do so. So I wouldn't be shocked to see another Alex Collins game here. Having Russell Wilson back is huge. And like you said, Tyler Lockett is the biggest addition to the Seattle Seahawks, and he's been playing the entire time. I think that addition to fantasy owners is even bigger than Wilson coming back, although I do think Wilson is a better start this week than Aaron Rodgers. Cody said he'd bench him. I would probably agree, but I would probably feel free to start Russell Wilson because he's had more of a ramp-up period than Rodgers will have.
Yeah, I mean, at least Wilson did practice. Now he hasn't played the game.
Yes.
But he did his mental reps where he ran a 2-minute drill in pregame warm-ups on IR. That's still one of the funniest things. I mean, no disrespect to Russell Wilson, but that Monday night game where he did the ghost 2-minute drill and he was calling plays in the huddle, that's one of my favorite things on the internet. One last note about this game. It's going to be cold and potentially wet. We might get our first snow game. It might not drop enough to get to actual snow. It might be sleet and rain, so it could get a little sloppy. Will be very interesting to see, Bum Finger, guy that hasn't played, could be more of a run-heavy game. But that's just something to keep in mind. Weather could play a factor in this one.
If it does get to close to snow range, I'm in on A.J. Dillon. We saw what happened the last time Green Bay played a snow game.
So moving on to the 8 o'clock game, we have the Kansas City Chiefs, the Las Vegas Raiders. Don't need to talk about that Green Bay snow game at all. Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to start there. Look, I know Patrick Mahomes put up a dud last week. And I know Patrick Mahomes hasn't been Patrick Mahomes this year, but you're still starting him. And this Raiders defense is nothing to be afraid of that you should be benching him. I know the Chiefs offense in general has not been what it's supposed to be, but if you have Tyreek Hill, if you have Travis Kelce, if you have Patrick Mahomes, even if you have Darrell Williams, you're still starting them. They're still in your starting lineup. I don't really feel like there's anybody else after that that's worth starting, but if you have those core guys, you're still starting them despite Kansas City not looking like themselves. And I honestly believe I don't see Kansas City staying like this the rest of the season and missing the playoffs and just being a dud for the whole season. I mean, look how they were in the playoffs the year they won the Super Bowl. They were down in the first half every single game, but they always came back and went hard when it mattered the most. Well, they're down in the first half of this season, and now it's time where it matters the most. I think Kansas City's going to go nuts in the second half and put up big points. So I'm starting all my Chiefs, all my core Chiefs. But, George, who do you like from the Raiders side?
I do not mind playing Derek Carr in this situation, and I'm going to come back to Derek Carr at the end of this and ask you guys a question, but I have to get a quick look at their injury report. If Josh Jacobs is a go, I like him here as well. If not, it's a Kenyon Drake game for me. I think one of the running backs has to be a start in my opinion. It just depends on the injury report. And
Kenyon
wide
Drake
receivers, Brian Edwards. What was that?
Kenyon Drake's been limited as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. If one of them is out, I think the other one is an even better play. If it is Jacobs and Drake at the same time, there's always going to be that kind of split because I feel like they've been using Drake more since the change in coaching staff. But Jacobs is still the lead guy. So if Jacobs is in, Jacobs is the starter in my opinion. And Drake is a very desperate kind of flex play just because of usage. But anyway, wide receivers, Hunter Renfrow is the guy to me. I know we're still praying and hoping for that Bryan Edwards breakout game, but it hasn't happened yet. He's just not getting the targets we want him to. So he's still somebody I'm stashing on my bench if I have and hoping he has a breakout in this game. I'm not going to start him on a Sunday night and hope he has to get me 15 points to win and then see him get 2. But I'm not scared of playing Hunter Renfrow, and obviously you're starting Darren Waller as well. What I wanted to come back to with Derek Carr is, I'm a big guy about playing your studs. So if I have Patrick Mahomes, I'm playing him. Tyler, you seem confident in Patrick Mahomes as well. I've seen a lot of people talking about benching Patrick Mahomes. And one of them I saw was he has Patrick Mahomes and Derek Carr. And he's talking about, I just need to play Derek Carr this week. would you consider playing Carr over Mahomes?
The only way
No.
I'd consider it, in my opinion, only way is if I have Darren Waller as like my best player on my team, because I love having that quarterback to top receiver hookup. But even then, no, I'm starting Patrick Mahomes everywhere. Like I said, I think he's going to feast in the second half, and I don't think the Raiders' defense is anything worth uh, being afraid of. So if I have Patrick Mahomes, I don't care what other quarterback I have, I'm starting him.
All right, and I just want to clear a few things up on the injury front. Kenyon Drake is not listed on the injury report, and then Josh Jacobs is on the injury report, but he's been a full practice on Wednesday and Thursday, so they both should be good to go. So probably lean Jacobs and then just hold Kenyon Drake in the event he gets hurt.
Agreed.
Again, the one name I'll bring it up again. I think it's worth adding Deshaun Jackson. I mean, he slots right in to replace Henry Ruggs. He'll be the deep shot guy. He can be over the middle. Not going to put him in my lineup week one, but he's definitely a guy, you pick up either right before the Sunday night game or at 1 o'clock game, depending on how your league works. If you can drop guys that, have already played, maybe you drop a guy that you were taking a swing on that didn't perform well and take a shot at Deshaun Jackson for the night game. That's something to consider. And then pivoting back to the Chiefs side, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is looking like he'll be activated off IR in time for this game. I know that the reports out of camp are saying that he's looking good. He's looking better than ever. Do you trust him? I know Tyler said he'd play Darrell Williams. How does him being back affect Darrell Williams and the Clyde Edwards-Helaire split?
If Clyde Edwards-Helaire is starting, or if he's really back in full, then I'm not starting Darrell Williams anymore. I didn't assume CEH would be back yet, so that's why I like Darrell Williams. But yeah, when CEH is back, I think he's going to take that starting job. Weirdly enough, I almost like Darrell Williams more than I like CEH when they are the sole back. When CEH is back, obviously, you're going to play him, but I just haven't been impressed with Edwards-Helaire really lately. But if you have him, you're starting him. Maybe not this week because I would give him a week to get up to speed, but got to manage that injury report. Let us know who else you have, and we can give you the option for who's best to start.
Yeah, definitely. Our DMs are always open on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You could send us even something on thecouchgms.com. One more game to go, guys, and we're all starting Odell Beckham when the Rams take on the 49ers, right?
No.
I wouldn't hate it.
Okay, good. No. Is that just because of the new toy they're going to want to show him off kind of thing? Is that why you're thinking that?
What 100%. It's Monday Night Football, their new toy. Like, he's going to get a touchdown.
And look, I don't like Matt Stafford as much as you guys do. I don't think he's that special, but Matt Stafford just got embarrassed on primetime football. Like, all eyes were on him, and he got embarrassed. I think him and honestly the whole Rams team are gonna come out primetime football again, and they're gonna be pissed, and they're gonna play lights out. And I think the Rams, they could break 50 with this offense and with how angry they're gonna be. I really expect big things from the Rams offense this week.
No, I'm with you.
In reality, though,
I was like, Odell Beckham, like, he could be if you have him and like you're stuck between him and a low end wide receiver, why not? We just watched Colt McCoy put up 35 points with no DeAndre Hopkins and no AJ Green on this 49ers defense. Like, it's possible. It's their new toy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think this really affects Cup status at all. I think it's going to be more Robert Woods and Odell Beckham Jr., Van Jefferson. Like, those guys will be the ones battling for fantasy relevancy as the season progresses. But they're going to call up a player or two to get Odell Beckham on. And part of the reason he picked the Rams was it's a Monday night game. There was a better chance he got to play this week. I mean, that wasn't like the deciding factor, but I'm sure went into it. So, but like Tyler said, this Rams offense is loaded. There's not really any guy that I'm not considering playing on their offense this week.
Well, yeah, I could definitely see that there's a chance that there could be so many points put up that Odell Beckham could get a touchdown. He could be okay, but and there is an extra day in the in the office basically because of them playing Monday. But if you're going to play Odell Beckham, I still don't like it this week just because he hasn't been in the system for too long. There's going to be a very limited number of plays that he's up to speed on. I feel more confident in running backs on short weeks because, I mean, most of the time it's just the offense has 10 schemed runs and they just kind of, hide it differently. So the running back can get up to speed faster than a wide receiver who has to learn all these different routes, all these different calls. They'd have to baby him in. I think if you want to get one more good week out of Robert Woods before you have to really start worrying, this would be the week. I'm okay with starting Robert Woods this week because of the situation. And I hope you're right about Cooper Kupp not being affected by this signing, just because he's been the by far wide receiver one. We were talking like, oh, maybe he's going to drop off and be that wide receiver two that we're used to. And he hasn't been. We were finally bought in, and now this happens. I hope Kupp stays as that dominant wide receiver for fantasy. But you're right. After that, it's a big head scratcher. Just this week, I'm treating it as Odell Beckham is not in the building yet just because there's not a lot of time. And I'm starting Robert Woods. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think it's also safe to say if you've been benching Van Jefferson waiting for, an injury or that breakout game, or maybe you're just in one of those really deep leagues. We know there's 16 team leagues out there. We know there's teams or leagues that have 5, 6, 7 flex spots just to be crazy. If you're in one of those leagues that's been starting Van Jefferson, I think that time's over. This week might be the last time you really see something good out of him. He might have that like one big play here or there, but sadly, Van Jefferson, as a up and coming young receiver, he's going to have to sit down and wait his turn again. I don't think he's worth owning in leagues anymore.
Well, I think that's enough.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's enough Rams talk. There is another team on the field. The San Francisco 49ers, they're not playing great. I think it's honestly time to start asking the question, is Kyle Shanahan a good coach? Is he overrated? Everyone talks about this. He's an offensive genius. He is now on his third or fourth losing season in 4 or 5 years. I mean, they had the one really good year. He's paid a boatload of money out to running backs, and yet we still don't know which running back to start here. I think we got to question the GM too. This is an organization that we had high expectations for, and we're consistently let down. A lot of people will say it's due to injuries, which definitely I understand. Especially last year, they dealt with injuries, but they've struggled. They just gave up 35 points to a backup quarterback with missing their top 2 wide receiver options. Tough days in San Francisco. But speaking of their running back, is there any of them that you're willing to start this week?
I like Elijah Mitchell. I don't. This week is definitely tough. I'd say he's like a running back 3, potential flex. I don't love starting him. If you have other options that you can play, I would definitely throw them in. But if you're going to start a 49ers running back, I think it's got to be Eli Mitchell at this point. I know that Jeff Wilson has been a guy that we're like, hey, stash on your IR. Well, he was finally activated last week and then didn't see the field at all. So I don't think he's ready yet. Wilson might eat into his carries later in the season. But I think, and also you got to think about the fact of game script. We've said it so many times. I think the Rams are going to go up big early. I think the 49ers are going to have to abandon the run. We've seen Eli Mitchell use in the past game, just not heavily. So if you have to start a running back, put in Mitchell. If the 49ers are going to get a touchdown, it's probably going to be either him or Debo. So, yeah, I don't love it. Try to find other options if you have them. And as far as wide receivers, like I said, Debo Samuel, you're probably still starting him if you have him. I don't love it because the 49ers as a whole are just a mess. But if you have Debo, you're probably starting him. If you have George Kittle, you're probably starting him. If you have Brandon Ayuk, I don't think he's ready yet. I would still bench him. Personally, maybe it's the coming alive show of Brandon Ayuk, but not this week.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys what you thought about Brandon Ayuk, and I was going to throw in, I don't like the matchup. And Debo is fully healthy. I think part of the Brandon Ayuk coming on last week was the injury. I'd like to believe he could build some momentum on it and keep going because he is such a talented wide receiver and been waiting for the breakout and waiting for it. But I think even in a normal situation where you say Brandon Ayuk is coming back alive, it's just a tough matchup. So it's hard to say play him regardless. So yeah, I'm sitting him on the bench. I'm not going to overreact if he only scores 6 points. I'm more looking for, is he on the field the entire game? And is he still getting looks to see how we're going to progress with him in future weeks?
Yeah, I think both Tyler and George hit the nail on the head there. So that wraps up our fantasy preview. Again, it's another long one, but it's always great to have all three of us here. And as always, thanks for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast.
And guys, you heard me say it a bunch of times throughout the podcast, but a lot of these things hinge on who you have. So if you need lineup advice, don't just, go with any old website. Don't just, pick whoever's projected more by your fantasy app. Like, come to us. We got 3 great minds. We can all go together and find the best lineup for you. Come to us and reach out to us about the podcast. Message us, comment, talk some smack on George, whatever you need to do. Just honestly, this podcast is so much more fun for us and way more fun for you when you get involved. So please get involved.
And thank you guys one more time for listening in. Be sure you join us next week when we recap Week 10 and talk about some waivers going into Week 11. We're getting close to the fantasy playoff, guys. Thank you one more time for Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap. I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.
Boom.